Over 2,000 years ago, ancient Chinese scholars observed the changing patterns in our natural world, the climate, the turning of the seasons, and astronomy. These scholars measured and divided the sun's annual movements into 24 equal parts, creating the 24 solar terms, which was used to govern agriculture in ancient China. Even to this day, this invention still guides the lives and traditions of hundreds of millions of Chinese people. Every year, around February 4th, the Chinese people welcome the first solar term, the beginning of spring, wearing silk flags in their hair and tying carrots with red cords to the trees. All the villagers celebrate the very first night of spring together. Hello, my name is Dominic. I'm originally from the UK, but I came traveling to China almost 25 years ago, and I've stayed here ever since. In 2016, something called China's 24 solar terms was included on UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Now, as I mentioned before, I've been in China a long time, but I'd never heard of the solar terms before. What are the solar terms, and what significance do they have in today's China? 2,000 years ago, it was a simpler time. It would be eons before science would produce modern technological comforts that we enjoy today. But despite this simplicity, the Chinese of ancient times were highly observant, especially when it came to astronomical and atmospheric phenomena. Taking into account the changes in the shadows cast by the sun throughout the year, along with the lengths of the days and nights, they charted and divided the annual motion of the sun into 24 equal segments. Each segment is one solar term, and the full cycle of 24 solar terms repeats itself year in and year out. Once this cycle was conceived, the ancient Chinese were allowed to clearly plan their year in advance, especially when it came to agriculture. Is there any use for the solar terms today? Are the 24 solar terms still a concept that are being passed down to other generations? With these questions in mind, I embarked on a journey into the unknown. Shiqian is the first destination on my mission to understand the solar terms. Located in the mountainous and undulating landscape of southwest China's Guizhou province, Shiqian has numerous waterways that wind their way through its rugged mountain landscape. 12 ethnic minorities number among the 460,000 people who call this place home. The area's unique traditional culture and its road system don't make it the easiest place for a tourist, but they certainly contribute to an authentic, incomparable ambience. In my experience, any attempt to quickly grasp on a city's history, culture and customs should start with a visit to a local museum. I arrive in Shiqian Museum hoping to find traces of the 24 solar terms. There are countless examples of traditional crafts, art and folk culture on display at the Shiqian Museum. But as younger generations increasingly seek their fortunes farther afield, many of these traditions may be fated to exist only in a museum. One particular folk cultural tradition, however, is luckily still being practiced today. Shuochun.
事前线2017年世界非遗说春仪式现在开始。
Li Chun, or the beginning of spring, as it is known, is the first of the 24 solar terms. It marks the starting point on the wheel of the four seasons, when the world is all revived. In Shiqian, every year on Lichun, the ancient custom of spring announcer begins. The people who play a central role in the gathering and its associated ceremonies are known as the spring announcers. They are the ambassadors of spring. In the past, farmers counted on spring announcers to announce the arrival of spring and the beginning of spring plowing. Fen Wanming is admired in his county. He continues to carry the torch of his ancestors as the fourth generation spring announcer.
...24个节气，每一个月催老百姓做活路，哪个月该做南活路，哪个月该做个南活路。今天立春，我们这个说春的来源就是从唐朝时候李世民他这个皇帝打到这个地方来班师回朝过后，才问我们要个南关，所以我们祖先就有个子孙关。子孙关就是春关。
Feng is at his busiest each year on the 10 days before and after Lichun. At this time, he walks the streets and goes from house to house to announce the arrival of spring in order to ensure everybody knows that it's time to start ploughing. But announcing the beginning of spring isn't that simple. Essential tools and cultural artifacts like spring calendars, seals, and carved spring oxen need to be prepared in advance. Spring calendars are carved onto wooden blocks and contain the 24 solar terms and applicable farming information for each term. Spring cattle are sculpted from wooden blocks.
这个水牛，
水牛，
是你弄的，师傅？真好。
你是嘛？要跟前老百姓吃饭，就靠它。
这个就是到时候出去说村，就得带上这个。
就是讲它了吧？
方师傅在这儿又开了一个出版社，是吧？你在不停地在印刷，是吧？
这个春地的意思就是说，一年四节，越大越小，至少24个节气，哪个月下种，哪个月栽秧，哪个月好潮，每一个月都有它的意义了吧？
就是这样就。对，翻过去就摆到那边了。
Oh, it's the most beautiful calendar ever. 怎么样？
可以。
好。
The spring teller was an occupation authorized by the emperor in ancient China. A hat and gown signifying their rank was their uniform, representing their status and level of knowledge.
我做一个第一个老外的春晚。
很棒。
Everything is ready, but before setting out, Feng pays his respects to heaven, earth, and his ancestors. He seeks the blessing of his work and looks to empower his chanting to benefit the farmers. The Chinese use joyful colors in farming ceremonies, showing their respect and appreciation of nature. Oxen have helped Chinese farmers for nearly 3,000 years. With this in mind, The Chinese also have a custom in which they show respect to cattle. One of the activities associated with spring chanting is for the spring announcer to stir the paper-made cattle using coloured wooden sticks. This is meant to rouse the cattle from their subdued winter state and encourage the farmers to prepare for spring ploughing.
Look at that.
After the ceremony, the real cattle are also warmed up. The strongest cattle in the county begin to set out on their first foray into the fields under the command of the most experienced farmer, signalling the start of a new year of working on the land. Spring ploughing is a top priority for farmers. My task now is to follow Feng from door to door to announce the beginning of spring. Every year at the beginning of spring, Feng Wanming traverses the mountainside and visits all the villages around Shiqian. He will typically greet more than 30 families every day. A more appropriate name for this practice should be spring singing, as the words are actually sung out loud rather than chanted.
春在山崖中，铁对的着，对的着，身看高矮上，高矮上。 挂金锅钱，三相公，
我自己印的日历，恭喜发财，
恭喜发财。
Sowing at the right time is essential for reaping a good harvest. The essence of a spring teller's lyrics are the 24 solar terms. These include the terms for weeding, the term for sowing, and the terms for harvesting. Feng knows his intricate solar term lyrics by heart.
财发人血，人发千口，国发万代，辈子千生，长发吉祥。哦。
But the lyrics are not written in stone, and he occasionally ad-libs his lyrics and wings it, with improvised blessings tailored to different situations and conditions for every different family. Feng spreads cheer to all that welcome him. Nobody wants to miss out on a blessing to kick off the year.
喝一杯一定发财哈！
对呀，俺的罗立下小衙门，是啊，玉的把小妹的请啊来，大妹的黄一来了有啊忙，杨有的老来来的有啊忙，没叫的黄啊，黄啊。
There is a strict time frame for chanting spring. 10 days after Li Cun, the practice is over for that year. Feng then goes home and rests for a while, rewarded with tribute money.
这是我家，
这完全是新的啊！
那边都后背，
好大好大，
就是啊，
几层？3层。那你们全家都住这儿呢？几个人呢
？6口人。
也不少。
嗯。
哇！
哎，走。
新家的样子。
嗯，
真好。这你什么时候搬进来的？
在5年前。
有5年前。小朋友是谁呢？这帅哥。
大的孙子，孙媳妇。
刚结婚。
啊，刚结婚。
刚结婚。你一年能挣多少钱？
我。
对。
我现在挣不到钱了。
他每年锁村要赚很多钱。
啊，你看，
是
他都说的呢。
缴村前10天，后10天，20天，一天100块钱，2000块钱。
谁给你钱呢？
主人家。
主家嘛，我们到每家每户去锁村，他要
到你家讲，
主家要
他就给你钱。
给
最多的一家还大概能给你多少钱？
有的都给了100多。
Chanting spring provides a good source of income for the spring announcers. These payoffs encourage spring announcers to pass on this tradition. The Chinese believe that spring is a key time of year, and whether or not the year will be a success depends on a good start in spring. Solar terms to Chinese farmers are about more than simply timing. They are a representation of a natural cultural heritage. When farmers start the spring ploughing, Feng's job is done. He stores the tools and props in his old house on the mountainside.
你唱这首歌，你是从什么时候开始呢？
从5、6岁就开始学起，我们的父母亲就教起，大多数传男不传女。
我还挺喜欢你这种老房。
是嘛，这是我自己做的嘛，这些都是我自己装的嘛。
你什么时候盖的
55年前。
55年前。
18岁。
那你就算一个木工了。
哎，是个木工嘛。
是吧？那以前你是靠木工来挣钱？
扣木工。
是吧？
关键是扣木工，要花5块一天。
5块钱。
一
天。
要花5块一天。
那你现在做这个？
现在的随便做就是200块一天的工资啊。
你现在做这个锁村，到里村就忙。
对。
就该唱歌啊等等。
是的。
你这海报我喜欢。这个海报你是？
这是几十年前的哟。
几十年前。
好
美这个。我们这个老外就喜欢这个。这个呢？这是什么？
是蓑叶，这个农村干活，天上一下雨，就要背在背上啊。干活的时候遮雨衣吧。现在嘛有雨衣，过去那个时候就是这个，就子没得雨衣，这是老古董啊。我不能丢失啊。
不能丢失。但这房子也不能丢，它一直在这儿呢。
娃娃些孙子些，他们不要了，是他们的事情。
对。
Since most young people from the countryside are moving to bigger cities to seek their fortunes these days, a lot of these old traditions are not being carried on. To help pass this tradition on, the local government here has set up a spring chanting class at Shitian Primary School. Feng tells me that every year, 2 graduates will join the spring telling team to pass on the tradition and knowledge of chanting spring and the 24 solar terms. I believe the reason why this tradition has been carried on for thousands of years is the Shutien's people's age-old dependence on the land and their deep respect for nature. Their understanding of nature and the solar terms continues to help nourish the tranquil countryside and industrious farms of Shutian.